If you're over 60 and frustrated that the belly fat just won't budge, no matter how much you diet or exercise, I need you to hear this. The problem isn't your willpower. It's not even your metabolism being broken. The problem is that almost everyone is focused on the wrong time of day. Because here's what 20 years of working with older patients has taught me. The most powerful fat-burning window your body has doesn't happen at the gym. It doesn't happen during a walk. It happens at night, while you're asleep. And if you're not deliberately activating that window, you're leaving the most effective fat-burning hours of your entire day completely on the table. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim, and welcome back to Senior Health Review, where we give you science-backed health strategies specifically designed for people over 60. Today, I'm going to walk you through 6 drinks, each one backed by peer-reviewed research that can shift your body into fat-burning mode while you sleep. Specifically targeting visceral fat, the dangerous fat that wraps around your organs and quietly drives heart disease, diabetes, and even dementia. Stay with me through all 6, because number 4 is the one I personally recommend most to my patients, and it might surprise you. Quick disclaimer before we dive in. This video is for educational purposes only. Always consult your own physician before making changes to your supplement or diet routine. Now, let's get into it. Before I give you the drinks, I need to take just 60 seconds to explain why nighttime matters so much. Because once you understand this, everything else makes sense. First, let's be clear about what visceral fat actually is. Unlike the fat you can pinch on your arms or thighs, that's subcutaneous fat, which sits just under the skin. Visceral fat is the fat that sits inside your abdominal cavity, packed around your liver, pancreas, intestines, and other vital organs. This fat is metabolically active. It releases inflammatory chemicals around the clock, and it's directly linked to your risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and cognitive decline. Now here's what changes after 60. 2 things happen that make visceral fat much harder to control. First, cortisol, your main stress hormone, tends to become dysregulated, staying elevated longer, especially at night. An elevated nighttime cortisol is essentially a direct signal to your body to store more fat around your organs. Second, human growth hormone, which is released primarily during deep sleep, drops dramatically with age. HGH is one of your body's primary fat-mobilizing hormones. Less of it means less fat gets broken down overnight. But here's the opportunity. Research shows that during the deep, slow-wave stages of sleep, your body naturally shifts into fat oxidation mode. It starts burning stored fat, including visceral fat, for energy. The question is, can we extend, deepen, and amplify that process? The answer is yes, and that's exactly what these 6 drinks are designed to do. Our first drink is warm golden milk, and before you roll your eyes, I promise this is far more than a trendy wellness drink. The science behind it is genuinely impressive. The recipe is simple. Heat 1 cup of unsweetened almond milk, or oat milk if you prefer. Add half a teaspoon of turmeric powder, a quarter teaspoon of ground ginger, and, this is critical, a small pinch of black pepper. The black pepper contains piperine, which increases the absorption of curcumin by up to 2,000%. Without it, most of the curcumin passes right through you. You can also add a tiny pinch of cinnamon for flavor. Now, why does this work for visceral fat? Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the primary reasons visceral fat accumulates and stays in older adults. Your body is essentially in a constant, slow inflammatory state, and fat tissue, particularly visceral fat, acts as both a source and a refuge for that inflammation. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, directly suppresses 2 of the most important inflammatory signals in the body, interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Research published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry has shown that curcumin supplementation significantly reduces these markers in older adults. But here's the bonus. Warm milk, especially with turmeric and ginger, also has a mild sedative effect. It helps you fall asleep faster and stay in deeper stages of sleep longer. And remember what I said, more time in deep sleep equals more time in fat-burning mode. I often recommend this to patients who have chronic joint pain or inflammatory conditions and can't tolerate anti-inflammatory medications. It's gentle, it's delicious, and it works. Drink this about 45 to 60 minutes before bed. Drink number 2 is a combination that most people think of purely as a sleep aid. And yes, it does help you sleep, but the mechanism by which it helps with visceral fat is something most doctors never discuss. The recipe. Steep 1 chamomile tea bag and 1 spearmint tea bag together in hot water for 5 minutes. That 5-minute steep time matters. It maximizes the release of a compound called apigenin. Use decaffeinated varieties only. Here's what's happening in your body. Chamomile contains high levels of apigenin, a flavonoid that binds to GABA receptors in the brain. This is the same receptor targeted by certain anti-anxiety medications. When apigenin activates these receptors, it produces a calming, sedative effect. And more importantly for our purposes, it drives down cortisol. Why does cortisol matter so much for visceral fat? Because cortisol is literally the hormonal instruction telling your fat cells to store more fat, especially in the abdominal area. Multiple studies have confirmed that elevated nighttime cortisol is one of the strongest predictors of visceral fat accumulation in adults over 60. One 8-week study in older adults showed that consistent chamomile consumption significantly reduced salivary cortisol levels. Now add spearmint to the mix. Spearmint has a mild anti-androgenic effect, meaning it gently modulates androgen hormones. This is particularly relevant for postmenopausal women and older men experiencing testosterone decline, both of whom see significant hormonal-driven visceral fat gain. The combination of cortisol reduction and androgen modulation makes this tea surprisingly powerful for the specific kind of belly fat that accumulates after 60. One caution: make sure the blends you buy are truly caffeine-free. Some herbal chamomile blends include green tea or other caffeinated ingredients. Check the label. Drink number 3 is one I've been recommending for years, and patients are always a little skeptical until they try it for 2 weeks. The recipe: 2 ounces of tart cherry concentrate mixed with 6 ounces of cold water. No added sugar. You're looking for tart cherry, Montmorency variety if possible, not sweet cherry or mixed cherry juice blends. You can find the concentrate at most health food stores or online. So why tart cherry juice? This one works through 2 separate pathways, and together they make a significant difference. First, melatonin. Tart cherries are one of the richest natural dietary sources of melatonin precursors. Drinking them before bed helps raise your melatonin levels naturally, which makes it easier to fall asleep and, more importantly, reach and sustain deep, slow-wave sleep. Second, anthocyanins. These are the pigments that make tart cherries dark red. They are powerful antioxidants that reduce oxidative stress at the cellular level. Oxidative stress is closely linked to metabolic dysfunction and visceral fat retention, particularly in aging adults. A study conducted at Louisiana State University found that adults who consumed tart cherry juice before bed increased their total sleep time by an average of 84 minutes compared to a placebo group. In older adults with insomnia, the effect was even more pronounced. And here's the fat loss connection that people miss. When you sleep better and longer, your ghrelin levels, that's the hormone that drives hunger, are significantly lower the next morning. Poor sleep is one of the most underappreciated drivers of belly fat because it makes you hungrier, more likely to overeat, and more likely to crave high-calorie foods the following day. Better sleep, less ghrelin, less visceral fat. The tart cherry juice is working on multiple levels simultaneously. One caution for those managing diabetes or blood sugar. The concentrate does contain natural sugars. Use it sparingly, stick to the 2-ounce serving, and monitor how it affects your glucose. This is the one I said might surprise you, and in my experience, it's the most impactful single intervention on this list, especially for people over 60. The recipe: dissolve 200 to 300 milligrams of magnesium glycinate powder in a glass of warm water. Magnesium glycinate is the form I specifically recommend. It's the most bioavailable and the gentlest on digestion. You can find it as a powder or in capsule form that you can open and dissolve. Now here's why this matters so much. Studies consistently show that magnesium deficiency is extraordinarily common in adults over 60, affecting somewhere between 40 and 60% of older Americans. And this isn't a minor issue. Magnesium plays a role in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. But for our purposes, 2 of those roles are critical. First, magnesium is essential for insulin sensitivity. When your magnesium levels are low, your cells become less responsive to insulin. This means blood sugar stays elevated longer after meals, more glucose gets converted to fat, and that fat accumulates preferentially in the visceral region. Second, and this is the mechanism I find most exciting, magnesium activates an enzyme pathway called AMPK. Think of AMPK as your body's metabolic master switch. When it's activated, it signals cells to stop storing fat and start burning it. It's essentially the same pathway activated by metformin, one of the most widely used diabetes medications, and by vigorous exercise. A clinical trial published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that magnesium supplementation in older adults significantly improved fasting blood glucose, reduced insulin resistance markers, and, importantly, resulted in a measurable reduction in waist circumference over 12 weeks. I've been saying this to patients for years. After everything I've studied and everything I've prescribed, magnesium remains the most underrated metabolic intervention I know of. It also helps you sleep. Magnesium activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, and helps regulate neurotransmitters like GABA that promote deep, restful sleep. If you do nothing else on this list, start with magnesium. Apple cider vinegar has been oversold in some circles and dismissed in others. The truth, as usual, sits somewhere in the science. The recipe: 1 teaspoon, and I want to be clear, just 1 teaspoon, of raw apple cider vinegar dissolved in a full glass of warm water. Add a small pinch of cinnamon for flavor and additional blood sugar benefit. 2 important rules: never drink this on an empty stomach, and always use a straw to protect your tooth enamel. Rinse your mouth with plain water afterward. The mechanism for visceral fat is well documented. Acetic acid, the active compound in apple cider vinegar, works through 2 main pathways. First, it suppresses fatty acid synthase, an enzyme your body uses to convert excess carbohydrates into fat. Less fatty acid synthase activity means less fat gets created in the first place. Second, it improves glycemic control. Taken before bed, it helps lower fasting blood glucose and reduces the insulin spike that can occur from any carbohydrates eaten at dinner. Since elevated insulin overnight is a direct promoter of fat storage, blunting that response has a measurable impact on body composition over time. The most compelling research comes from a randomized controlled trial conducted in Japan, published in the Bioscience, Biotechnology, and Biochemistry journal. Participants who consumed apple cider vinegar daily for 12 weeks showed significant reductions in visceral fat area, measured by CT scan, compared to the placebo group. That's not self-reported data, that's imaging. Who should be cautious? If you're on diuretic medications or have a history of low potassium levels, speak with your doctor first. Acetic acid can affect electrolyte balance. And again, always dilute, always protect your teeth. Our final drink is the most filling of the 6, and it works through a completely different mechanism than the others. The recipe? Blend together 1 full scoop of collagen peptides powder, half a scoop of casein protein powder, and 1 cup of unsweetened almond or oat milk. You can drink it cold or slightly chilled. If you don't have a blender, you can shake it in a protein shaker bottle. Just make sure it's fully dissolved. Why do we care about protein before bed for visceral fat? Here's the thing that most weight loss advice misses entirely when it comes to people over 60. Fat loss and muscle preservation are not separate goals. They are deeply intertwined. After the age of 60, most people are losing muscle mass at a rate of 1 to 2% per year. This condition is called sarcopenia, and it's one of the primary reasons your metabolic rate slows down as you age. Less muscle means fewer calories burned at rest. Fewer calories burned at rest means more calories stored as fat, especially visceral fat. To preserve muscle mass, your body needs a supply of amino acids available during the overnight repair window. Casein protein is specifically designed for this. It's a slow-digesting protein that releases amino acids steadily over 6 to 8 hours while you sleep. The result? A study from Maastricht University found that consuming casein protein before bed increased muscle protein synthesis overnight by 22% in older men. More muscle synthesis overnight means better preservation of metabolically active tissue, which keeps your resting metabolism higher and burns more fat passively. Now, why add collagen? Collagen peptides support gut lining integrity. This matters more than most people realize. A compromised gut lining allows bacterial compounds called lipopolysaccharides to leak into the bloodstream, a process sometimes called metabolic endotoxemia. These compounds trigger systemic inflammation, which is directly linked to visceral fat accumulation. Collagen helps seal that barrier. Together, this shake protects your muscle, preserves your metabolism, reduces gut-driven inflammation, and feeds your body exactly what it needs to do its overnight repair work. Now let me pull this all together. If you're wondering which of these 6 drinks is the most effective, here's how I'd rank them by primary benefit. For improving insulin sensitivity and activating fat-burning metabolism, magnesium water is number 1, hands down. For reducing cortisol and hormonal belly fat, chamomile and spearmint tea. For reducing the inflammation that locks in visceral fat, golden milk. For improving sleep quality to extend the fat-burning window, tart cherry juice. For directly suppressing overnight fat storage, apple cider vinegar tonic. For preserving muscle and metabolism, the protein and collagen shake. The power stack I recommend most often to patients: magnesium water combined with chamomile and spearmint tea. These two together, cortisol reduction plus insulin sensitization, address the 2 most common metabolic drivers of visceral fat in people over 60. That combination alone, used consistently for 8 to 12 weeks, can produce measurable changes. Timing rules. Drink all 6, or whichever you choose, 45 to 60 minutes before bed, not right before you lie down. The reason: if you're drinking a significant volume of liquid right before sleep, you risk waking up for the bathroom at 2 a.m., which fragments your sleep and undoes all the benefits. Nocturia, waking to urinate at night, is already very common in adults over 60. Be mindful of total liquid volume in the 2 hours before sleep. What to absolutely avoid. Alcohol. Even 1 glass of wine before bed dramatically suppresses deep sleep and raises cortisol. It feels relaxing, but it fragments sleep architecture and promotes visceral fat storage. Sweetened beverages or juices. The insulin spike before bed reverses everything these drinks are working to achieve. Caffeine after 2 p.m. It has a half-life of 5 to 6 hours, meaning if you drink coffee at 4 p.m., half of it is still circulating at 10 p.m. These 3 alone are canceling your fat-burning window every night if you're not careful. Let me give you a quick recap before you go. Drink 1. Warm golden milk. Fights inflammation, the primary cause of visceral fat retention. Drink 2. Chamomile and spearmint tea. Lowers cortisol, the hormone that tells your body to store belly fat. Drink 3. Tart cherry juice. Deepens sleep and reduces the hunger hormone ghrelin. Drink 4. Magnesium water. Activates AMPK, your body's fat-burning metabolic switch. Drink 5. Apple cider vinegar tonic. Suppresses fat-storing enzymes and lowers overnight blood sugar. Drink 6. Protein and collagen shake. Preserves muscle mass and keeps your metabolism high. Here's what I want you to take away from this. After 60, your body isn't broken. It hasn't given up on you. It's simply operating under a different set of hormonal and metabolic rules. And once you understand those rules, you can work with your biology instead of against it. You don't need to starve yourself. You don't need to spend 2 hours at the gym. Sometimes the most powerful intervention is something as simple as what you put in a glass before bed. I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Which drink are you going to try first tonight? And if you've tried any of these before, let me know what your experience was. I read every comment. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We publish new videos every week specifically for adults over 60 who want evidence-based health strategies, not generic advice. Next week, I'm going to show you the 5 foods that are increasing your visceral fat, and some of them are foods that have a reputation for being healthy. You don't want to miss that one. Until then, take care of yourself, get a good night's sleep, and I'll see you in the next video.